Immediately after Solomon took over the full reign of the kingdom, the foolish request of Adonijah, his stepbrother, caused the bloodshed of not only himself but others also, and the banishment of Nathan the priest, in fact, the last of Eli's descendants. Let us find out what Adonijah's request that drove Solomon with such extremes. Greetings to you, brothers and sisters, in Jesus' matchless name. We are so happy to have you again joining us in our Bible study on 1 Kings. In our last study, we saw the confirmation of Solomon as the third king of Israel. This was after two strong and threatening contestations, one by Absalom and another by Adonijah. It was David's desire that Solomon succeeded him, yet God's will that he actually comes to power. As David bowed in worship on his bed on hearing the coronation, Adonijah and his group were filled with fear and trembling as they dispersed separate ways. We then saw the final instructions of David to Solomon. The first was that Solomon remain strong and brave as he keeps all obligation to the Lord. Second, David recalls with names those that were to be punished or rewarded, while Joab, son of Jeruah, and Shimei, son of Gera, were not to be spared. The sons of Barzillai, the Gileadite, were to be rewarded for their loyalty shown during Absalom's revolt. There are so much more that are thrillingly interesting, and I warmly welcome you again as we study the book of 1 Kings further.
1 Kings chapter 2, verse 10. So David slept with his fathers and was buried in the city of David. He had reigned 40 years over Israel, 7 years in Hebron, 33 in Jerusalem. So Solomon sat on the throne of his father David, and his rule was firmly established. Friends, you note there is a note of sadness in this death of King David. He was a great man of God. Do you recall the first son of David and Bathsheba? He died when he was just a few days old. David said of him, you remember, "He will never come to me, but I will go to him." Now, David has gone to be even with that child. Solomon, now that his father is gone, occupies the throne. A lot of sadness and also a moment of joy, mixed emotions. At the change of any dynasty or ruler, there is always a time of turmoil and great change. Verse 13. Now Adonijah, the son of Haggith, went to Bathsheba, Solomon's mother. Bathsheba asked him, "Do you come peacefully?" He answered, "Yes, peacefully." Then he added, "I have something to say to you." "You may say it," she replied. Even though Solomon is now on the throne, Adonijah has not given up the idea about wanting to be king. He comes to Bathsheba, still harboring this thought. She does not have much confidence in him, as we notice, and inquires about his mission. He says that it is a peaceful one. She says, "Okay, I'm listening. Tell me what you have to say." Verse 15. Notice what Adonijah says. "As you know," he said, "the kingdom was mine. All Israel looked to me as their king. But things have changed, and the kingdom has gone to my brother, for it has come to him from the Lord." He's saying that he was the popular choice, the people's choice, but Solomon was God's choice. You notice. Verse 16. "Now I have one request to make to you. Do not refuse me." You may make it, she said. So he continued, Please ask King Solomon. He will not refuse you to give me Abishag the Shunammite as my wife. Abishag, you recall, was the young woman who nursed David during his last days. He is saying, Since the kingdom has been taken away from me, I have only one small request. I want the woman who attended on David to be my wife. She was a Shunammite woman. Verse 18, Very well, Bathsheba replied, I will speak to the king for you. When Bathsheba went to the king Solomon to speak to him for Adonijah, the king stood up to meet her, bowed down to her, and sat down on his throne. He had a throne brought for the king's mother, and she sat down at his right hand. I have a small request to make to you, she said. Do not refuse me. The king replied, Make it, my mother. I will not refuse you. So she said, Let Abishag the Shunammite be given in marriage to your brother Adonijah. As we have just seen the background, this request is loaded with a lot of trickery, but Adonijah knew that Solomon would not deny his mother anything. That is the reason he went through Bathsheba to Solomon than rather going to King Solomon directly. Verse 22, King Solomon answered his mother, Why do you request Abishag, the Shunammite, for Adonijah? You might as well request the kingdom for him. After all, he is my older brother. Yes, for him and for Abiathar the priest and Joab the son of Zeruiah. Solomon is raging, friends. Verse 23, Then Solomon swore by the Lord, May God deal with me, be it ever so severely, if Adonijah does not pay with his life for this request. What Adonijah was actually doing, friends, if you'd notice through this whole plot of going to Bathsheba and making this request, was actually making a move toward the throne. He was doing a dangerous thing, but he was being very clear about it. Adonijah was Solomon's elder brother, and Solomon, of course, had been aware of this. Although Bathsheba, the mother, in her simplicity, felt that Adonijah's request for Abishag was a reasonable one, Solomon's keen mind instantly penetrated the plot. Fantastic, isn't it, friends? Verse 24, And now, as surely as the Lord lives, he who has established me securely on the throne of my father David and has founded a dynasty for me, as he promised, Adonijah shall be put to death today. Verse 25, So King Solomon gave orders to Benaiah son of Jehoiada, and he struck down Adonijah and he died. Adonijah's death was a brutal one, of course, but his death eliminated a usurper to the throne, a contender for the throne. It was necessary to execute him in order to establish Solomon on the throne. As long as Adonijah lived, he would continue to connive and plot in an attempt to seize the throne that rightfully belonged to Solomon. It was given to Solomon by God. And now, having removed Adonijah, Solomon realized it would be necessary to remove from positions of influence also those who had supported Adonijah. Notice how he goes through with this plan. Verse 26, To Abiathar the priest the king said, Go back to your fields in Anathoth. You deserve to die, but I will not put you to death now, because you carried the ark of the sovereign Lord before my father David, and shared all my father's hardships. So Solomon removed Abiathar from the priesthood of the Lord, fulfilling the word of the Lord who had spoken at Shiloh about the house of Eli. Abiathar was a descendant of Aaron. He was removed from his priestly office and sent home in disgrace because he had participated in Adonijah's rebellion. The only reason he was not executed was because of his faithfulness to David, Solomon's father, and also because he had carried the ark of the sovereign Lord. Even during Absalom's rebellion against his father, Abiathar had stood faithfully with his father David. Effectually, the ending of Abiathar's priesthood ended the line of Eli. Verse 28. When the news reached Joab, who had conspired with Adonijah, though not with Absalom, he fled to the tent of the Lord. Notice he does the same thing. He took hold of the horns of the altar. King Solomon was told that Joab had fled to the tent of the Lord and was beside the altar. Solomon ordered Benaiah, the same man, son of Jehoiada, "Go, strike him down." So Benaiah entered the tent of the Lord and said to Joab, "The king says, 'Come out.'" But he answered, "No, I will die here." Benaiah reported to the king, "This is how Joab answered me." When Joab, you notice, heard what happened to Abiathar and Adonijah, he took off for the tall timber of the ark. He ran to the tabernacle of the Lord and caught hold of the horns of the altar for sanctuary. Solomon chose Benaiah to be Joab's executioner. He went after Joab and asked him to come outside the tabernacle. But you notice, Joab refuses, saying, "I'll die here if I have to die." Verse 31, then the king commanded Benaiah, "Do as he says, strike him down and bury him, and so clear me and my father's house of the guilt of the innocent blood that Joab shed. The Lord will repay him for the blood he shed, because without the knowledge of my father David, he attacked 2 men and killed them with the sword, both of them, Abner son of Ner, commander of Israel's army, and Amasa son of Jether, commander of Judah's army, the southern kingdom, were better men and more upright than he. Joab, we see, was a bloodthirsty man. His hands were full of innocent blood. Verse 33. May the guilt of their blood rest on the head of Joab and his descendants forever. Not just Joab, his descendants, but on David and his descendants, his house and his throne. May there be the Lord's peace forever. So Benaiah, son of Jehoiada, went back and struck down Joab and killed him. And he was buried on his own land in the desert. Interesting, in the desert. It was executed because his part in the rebellion was against the king that sits on the throne now, Solomon. Shimei was another traitor. David would not touch him because he had given his word that he would not. Solomon now puts restrictions on the Shimei. Then the king, in verse 36, sent for Shimei and said to him, "Build yourself a house in Jerusalem and live there, but do not go anywhere else." Solomon wanted Shimei to be where he could keep his eye on him. Wherever Shimei went, Shimei sowed seeds of rebellion. Solomon wanted to watch his every move. Verse 37. The day you leave and cross the Kidron Valley, you can be sure you will die. Your blood will be on your head. Shimei answered the king, What you say is good. Your servant will do as my lord the king has said. And Shimei stayed in Jerusalem for a long time. Verses 37 and 38 of 1 Kings chapter 2. Friends, Solomon commanded Shimei to build a home in Jerusalem and to remain within city limits. He was forbidden to return and to live in his own tribe. Shimei promised to be obedient to Solomon's terms. Verse 39. But 3 years later, two of Shimei's slaves ran off to Achish, son of Maacah, king of Gath. And Shimei was told, Your slaves are in Gath. At this, Shimei saddled his donkey and went to Achish at Gath in search of his slaves. So Shimei went away and brought the slaves back from Gath. Shimei went outside city limits. He did this in direct disobedience to the king Solomon's orders. Solomon was told what Shimei had done. So Solomon sent for him. But 3 years later this was done, after Solomon had warned Shimei. Verse 43. Why then did you not keep your oath to the Lord and obey the command I gave you? The king also said to Shimei, You know in your heart all the wrong you did to my father David. Now the Lord will repay you for your wrongdoing. But King Solomon will be blessed. David's throne will remain secure before the Lord forever. Then the king gave the orders to Benaiah, and he went out and struck Shimei down and killed him. The kingdom was now firmly established in Solomon's hands. We are to conclude now, friends. But with Shimei's death, Solomon had completed the charge made to him by David his father. Solomon had removed most of the contenders to the throne. Now he could reign in peace.
That was a bloody chapter indeed, brothers and sisters. And it is a good reminder to us that we watch our back against people who are especially from within, scheming for power and division solely for their greed and ambition. We are called to pray for our enemies and bless them. This is especially in knowing that God only can change their hearts towards goodness and truth, and that revenge is God's prerogative, His privilege or right, not humans. Meanwhile, none of us should ever imagine that God would let go evil without getting their due. Everything that we do, right or wrong, whether in the word or in deed, is ever forgotten by God, who could repay each one accordingly. It is also important to decide well on who we befriend and what decisions we agree with. How we live our lives matter, dear friends, and we are beckoned to live in light, holy and worthy before God. As you keep watching our programs, may God continue to bless you.